Lots to see on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE this weekend. 5:30 p.m. Friday, the Marysville Christmas tree lighting, live from downtown Marysville.
And Merry Christmas to all.
6:30 p.m. Friday, the Marysville State Reform School. Why and where was it located here? Live from the Mary Aaron Museum. 5 p.m. Saturday, the Marysville Christmas Parade, live from historic downtown Marysville. 4 p.m. Sunday, the 83rd Messiah performance by the Yuba-Sutter Oratorio Society Chorus and Yuba-Sutter Symphony, presented by Plumas Lake Self Storage. Lots to see on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE this weekend, all on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE, on Facebook at LiveStreaming YS. The history of the Marysville Reform School. Another Talks and Tours presentation from the Mary Aaron Museum. Learn more and support Talks and Tours at MaryAaronMuseum.com.
Good evening and welcome to Talks and Tours, sponsored by the Mary Aaron Museum. I'm Chris Pettigo, board member. And I thank you all for coming out tonight here in person and out in the webosphere to hear about the State Reform School at Marysville. I'd like to thank the support of my board members, board president, local city councilmen, members of the Historic Commission. It's been an adventure. This discovery of the school started with one line on a board here in the museum. And many of you know I'm quite an aficionado of finding the deep, dark secrets and relics of Marysville and other areas past. So this reform school, for any of you that know me and probably have heard me talk about the reform school more than you'd ever care to hear, it's become a passion. And I'll say this. The school, they started the construction in 1860. Opened in 1861. Governor Downey opened the school around noon 160 years ago today. Wow. He traveled from Sacramento to here to open the school, issued a proclamation. 30 students were there to begin with on this day. And one of the most fascinating points is all the politicians gave speeches, but as it broke up into a party afterwards, some of the students got a band together and performed in the gardens. It was one of the most fascinating parts of the story was to hear that these kids started a band like that right on the spot and entertained. And the creation of the Reform School started under Governor Weller in his message to the state legislature. He wanted to create a place where the children of California could go to be reformed. He didn't want them to go to San Quentin and to be taught bad things by the criminals kept there by the state at San Quentin. So his message was sound. He created a board of trustees. And then we got a new governor. Governor Downey was the lieutenant governor, 1860. The governor resigned to take a Senate seat. And so when Governor Downey had his reservations about the school, it was over budget, it didn't meet what he wanted, but the research that the people brought to him, he said, okay. He signed it into law. William H. Parks, who's buried at our Marysville Cemetery, carried the legislation. The Tea Garden House that so many of us are familiar with in Yuba City, he helped craft part of the legislation. It's a who's who of local people. The architect was chosen, Mr. John A. Steele was the architect of record. Mr. Miller, who built this lovely home that we're in, participated and helped with the project. It helps put us on the map as a historical landmark. So this little small snippet about the school has catapulted, in my humble opinion, one of the best discoveries that we've seen come out of Yuba County in a great number of years. And I'll say this, all of the work for this was done through research. I dragged my big book up here, but I left it over there, and that's okay. It's this thick, and the second one's that thick. Wow. If you go to the state of California's state architect website, they make mention of the Marysville Reform School, but they have no pictures, they have no drawings, they have no design. The original renderings were lost at some point at the state. And so during this pandemic, I spent hours and hours and hours reading the reports from the state commissioners. And what amazed me is how we missed this great piece of history 7 miles out of town. The building no longer stands. It was torn down 1872 by Mr. James Strain. And to put it in comparison, the grounds and the building contained 1 million bricks made on location. The Empire State Building, when it was built, contained 10 million bricks. So 1/10 the bricks in this building were, it's just hard to imagine the Empire State Building and then this. It's just a grand comparison. When the building was torn down in 1872, what's amazing is if we still had it. This was considered one of the best buildings in the state of California. So I'm going to bring up Mr. Stuart Gilchrist, our city council person. And what he did is he brought his expertise and his talent from the reports from the state and created and brought this building to life for all of us to enjoy. And I'd like him to explain the process he went through to be able to do that, because he brought my passion to life through this drawing. Stuart?
Thank you. It's good to be here. Do I really need to have this microphone in my hand? I tend to speak very loudly. So, I was honored to help Chris bring this to life. Chris came to me with a collection of official documents, and actually I would love to grab them. I'm a very visual person, and I'd like to have them in my hand. Whenever I do a project, I keep all of my notes, everything, every sketch, every schematic, everything as I start my process, or the process of doing a floor plan. Perfect. I did this for the mayor today at the Christmas tree lighting. I held the microphone for him. So these are the report Joint Committee State Reform School documents that Chris was able to get from the state archives. And there are many of these documents which describe the design of the school before it was built, and it describes the school after it was built. And it goes into great detail. It describes the width and the depth of each room, each floor, the height. It doesn't give us the pitch, which is an angle, of the roof line or anything. We kind of had to come up with that when we did the floor plan. So really, this can fall. That's just a tissue. Don't worry. It's okay. This, of course, I'm going to go a little bit backwards. This is how I came up with the coloring for the rendering, just to show what the brick color would be. The most important thing is, there are many sketches here, the floor plan. So this is given in these descriptions to the state on how the school was doing in great detail. The measurements and the dimensions of the width and the length of the hallways, the rooms that were used, the bricks, the stone, the cutting of the stone, bush-hammered stone. They go into great detail describing not only what the materials were, but how much they cost. And it's quite possible that the reason there were so many bricks was because there was actually a very tall fence all the way around the Reform School. And it doesn't give it gives us great detail as to the fence in this description as well. And this is a drawing, an isometric drawing, showing the fence that went all the way around this school. There was never a dome. And so, but it describes the radiused portico and the rounded staircase to get up into the front. It describes basement, which was always the first floor in a building, and then the first floor was the second floor, and the third floor was what have you. And there was an attic as well, and the top floors were unfinished. They did not complete them. The school was to hold 200 students. I think only 50 ever attended. The children were forced to clean the rooms and the hallways. That was their jobs. There was no staff. It was the students. And so this, if you can see this floor plan, the very long hallway on the main floor, and it was, these are called wings, axis, north, south. They even describe the north and the south. So we were able to determine where the school, what direction the school was facing. It even described where it was in proximity to the Feather River and how far away it was from downtown Marysville. That's it. You want me to add any more?
Good.
Perfect.
And we owe Stuart a great debt of thanks because he brought the research to life. And we owe the county assessor and Sue Moyer for helping me determine the exact location of the Reform School. We've not surveyed the site. It's on private property. And so, as much as I love the school and the ideas, it's still private property. Belongs to someone else. And so I respect that, and I'll get out there, and it's going to be an adventure to go out and actually touch the ground where it is and where it was. But I'll say this. Keep in mind, this was the state of California's first reform school. The San Francisco School of Industry was of similar use, but it was privately funded. And the interesting part about this journey is Mr. Pelton, the first superintendent, he was the father of public education in California, had the first public school by ordinance in San Francisco. And so when he came here, he was not so pleased that they built it here. In December, before the school opened, the river flooded. They had to redo some of the school. And so he said between December and after winter, the roads were impassable. He also believed that the reason they built it here is because the state got it for free. This land where the school sits all belonged to Mr. Kovalon. The city of Marysville bought it for $1,300. It's 100 acres. Had it surveyed, gave it to the city, and the city deeded it to the state. And what's fascinating, from when it opened in 1861 to when it closed and finally went away in 1872, the state gave it back to the city in 1868. And they took it had a library that rivaled Stanford's. The collection that was in it was just amazing. And they took it away because people had started to break into it, unfortunately, and steal things. And so when the city finally got rid of it, they sold it for $1,000. 100
acres, wow.
100 acres, all the grounds. The amazing part is, and you can see where it is. Yeah, you can see the actual location. Hold that for me, Sue.
This, we got this from the county, and this was actually found in a deed book, and This is the only thing they let me copy. This is a copy of Charles Kovalot's property. You can see Kovalot here, and I had to enlarge this 400 times. There is a drawing of the school. And this one over here, you can see Ramirez, Sampson. So these were our city fathers owned all of this land, and where Charles Kovalot was. And you can see the initials, State Reform School. Now these are enlarged at least 400 times. So when you're looking at these maps, you don't even see them. They just look like smudges. So Jeff Olson and I had a great time enlarging these before he retired, and we actually found the exact location.
Yeah, location, right there, right there. Right there is the exact location. Yes, that is the Feather River.
Doesn't look like it anymore.
It's changed a lot. And so what's interesting is this was just not a school for Marysville. This is a school for the entire state of California from 4 years old till they turned 18. 4 years old. And the minimum sentence was 3 years. So there was children from every corner of the state of California. There were some young kids in Sacramento that got sent here for 3 years because they were stealing peanuts out of the bins at a store. There was a young lady whose father was in the Marysville Riflemen that was arrested down on First Street and sent to the Reform School for 3 years. And the newspaper of the time, of the Record, indicated she was sent there because her father was away volunteering in the Civil War, because this is happening all in the throes of the Civil War. And so they said they've sent the young girl to the school because her mother is a drunk and unable to take care of her. And nowadays we would look at that in the newspaper and go, oh my, we shouldn't write that. But this is 1860, 1861 to 1868. There was 3 boys that built a rowboat and escaped down the river all the way to Verona. And they were put back on the boat and sent back to Marysville and taken back to the school. The wall Stewart talked about was 6 foot tall. It had gardens, they had play areas, and as you get into the state reports, you'll find they had cooks and laundresses, and the staff improved. So Mr. Pelton, what I found most fascinating is after his first 3 years at the Reform School, which he didn't think very much of, was on his way back to San Francisco on the road between the Reform School and Marysville and crashed his wagon and never recovered. He was never the same. And so, to me, I thought, interesting twist of ironic fate. We have 3 board members, our board of trustees from the Reform School, buried out at our historic Marysville Cemetery. We had one of the board of trustees had a business on 2nd Street, 2nd and Maiden Lane in Marysville. And so, as you get into the stories of the children, as Stuart said, they cleaned this building every day. They scrubbed the floors. They cleaned the windows. They had a fresh water well, and we've all watched the movies and read the books where you put the horses around the wheel and gave them a little goose and the horse goes round and round. At this school, it was the children. It was the older children, the stronger ones. Every day they went to work. They had education. On Sundays, they went to church. It had a beautiful library. It had meeting rooms. They were educated. They took 10 newspapers at the school delivered once a week. The report says once a week, 10 newspapers from the state. How they got them here, I don't know. Mighty quick wagons. But they were educated. The school itself was built kind of on a religious theme that you got them away from the real criminals, you could reform them. And so could you imagine, I've got nieces and nephews, some of you have grandchildren, taking your 4-year-old and dropping them off at the Santa Cruz police station in 1863 and have them put on a wagon and sent to the school. So they either committed a crime They were uncontrollable or they were destitute. They had to go somewhere, and the state took them to the school. I can only imagine this giant building full of 250 students, just teeming with life. And as we enjoy the holidays tonight, we get a little closer to Christmas. 160 years ago, there was 30 children out on the Feather River in 1861 that were working every day, trying to get better. You know, the staff, they taught them, they were teachers, they were educators, they wanted to be there. But you can also imagine that they were also teaching them a trade, because a lot of these kids, as they got older, they were loaned out to the local farmers to learn the trades. Because when they left the school, they wanted them to have something to build on, a trade, something they could do, where they could go to work. And a lot of them, when the school closed, there were several children that they list that stayed in the area, that went to work. And it's just amazing to me that this building came to life with their children. They're talking now of reforming the children's justice system and closing everything down. But in 1861, this is all they had. And what's interesting is the school, the people of San Francisco, they didn't want this school. They lobbied in the newspaper. They wrote letters to the editor how bad it was, made up stories how bad it was. They thought that they could take care of those children far better than the people out here in the rural counties. The San Francisco School of Industry was a much more affluent school. And because of closer to the proximity to transportation, the cost of housing the children was lower. But this reform school was what Governor Weller wanted. He was a Christian man, and he believed in reform. And he believed these children could be saved. And the way to do it was to educate them, make them work hard, and get them back into society. But could you imagine dropping your 4-year-old off there and picking up, when they're 7? Some of the kids never left the school until it closed. And we've all seen the Tea Garden house over in Marysville. Dr. Teagarden took the last 8 children in 1868 to the San Francisco School of Industry. And that's when the school closed. But I'll tell you, between the boys escaping, there was an escape every couple months. It'd be printed in the paper. They claimed, Mr. Pelton kind of emphasized this, that the weather was miserable on the Feather River in the summer. But they had visitors. The school had visitors would come and say, oh no, it was a beautiful place. It was a garden spot. They had grapes. They had peaches. They grew crops. They worked the land around it. And they made it their home because they had no home. These were the orphans of California, per se, owned by the state, taken care of. And one of the most interesting stories that came out of it, there was a young man named Frenchie close to the end of the school closing, and he'd escaped several times. And the newspaper editor at the time liked to write about this poor young man. And so he had escaped, and he'd been brought back, and there's a letter from the police department of the city of Marysville indicating he was one of the most incorrigible youth they had ever seen. They'd picked him up 2 or 3 times at least and brought him back to the school. So the superintendent at the time said, well, you escape one more time, and I'm going to give you as many lashes as there was words in the paper. There was 36 words in the paper. He was taken back to the school. He was taken down to the basement, and he was given 36 lashes. The basement was a pool, but it's more like it was not what I'd call a recreational swimming pool. It was a very large bathing pool, so they could bathe everybody at one time. Because the water tower was on the top. And the other connection to this building is the Marysville Water Company had part to do with the installation of the pipes in the water system. So it all really ties back to Marysville. And so as you take this journey through this school's storied past, there's so many children's names that you can read about and that I've researched. And it's hours and hours of interesting reading. And a lot of the state reports are how much grain they used. But it paints a picture of what life was like in the 1860s. You can tell a lot by the clothes they wear, the materials they used. You can go through the list. And as I was going through these reports, it's interesting because they rented a room in the original Marysville courthouse when they first had their meetings before the school was built. And the county of Yuba charged them $35 for carpeting, to put carpet on the floor in this room. And it's such a connection. And this school has virtually been lost for 160 plus years, if you think about it, because the state's first reform school, they only make slight mention of it on the state architect's website, only in passing. Mr. Eichler, the state architect who did a lot of the renderings and recreations and drawings of the original state buildings, there was nothing for him to draw from. They mention it being here, and that's as far as it goes. And what's interesting is when I talk to the state architect and I talk to the state archive people, 10% of our history is preserved at the state. And so this just shows that we need to protect and remember our historic sites. Because if we don't remember these places, what else are we going to forget? We learned that this grand idea worked. Maybe we didn't like their methods. Maybe we didn't like what happened there. But this school, unlike the other ones, is not rife with abuse. There's one case of marginal justice, but you can't apply 2021 justice to 1865 justice. You just can't do it. It's not fair. But I'll tell you this, the thing I learned the most about this school was that it puts Marysville on the map. It's a first. It's a state of California first. We have so many of them. And that's why it was so important to give this presentation and so important to explain to people that just because we don't see it anymore doesn't mean it's not still a part of the fabric of our community. And so can you imagine traveling down these hallways, 11 and 12 feet tall and 16 feet long? It was a monster building. And they had the ability to maintain it. And they kept it as long as they could. And to think that so many of the local people that were trustees and board members are buried in our cemetery. One of the original ones is buried in the city of Colma, the city of the dead. 3 million buried, 2,500 population. We are one of the best places for history anywhere in the state of California. And the discovery of this school, in my humble opinion, because I did a lot of digging, is probably one of the more significant finds we've had in a long time. We all know about the buildings in downtown Marysville. We all know about the different places all over town. This was outside the city. But the furniture was bought in the city. The books and the materials came from the city, from the merchants. Now, could you imagine leaving here tonight to go back to the school that was 7 miles out of town in the fog, in a wagon? I mean, what an adventure. What an adventure. And just to think that we've had so many of these things right here, right in our grasp. And these old houses, they tell these stories of these places and these children. And the next step is obviously to get it all put together in a book so that everybody can enjoy the passion that I feel for this school. And I jokingly say it, I think all of my friends have probably heard about the Reform School enough to where they almost know it as well as I do. I know our board president probably heard me say reform school more than anybody I know. And so it's an adventure, and this is why I love history. It's the discovery of these things. Because honestly, how many people in this room knew that the school even existed? The state of California barely knew it existed. They've asked for my notes to share and Stuart's rendering will go to the state archives to live forever. You know?
Legacy begins.
But
Well, how appropriate given the fact my mother would say to me, "You better watch it, or I'm going to send you to the reform school."
now that's a good one, Stuart. I like that.
Oh yes.
But it's been a journey to explore this, and it's all in paper form. I reached out to the original author who wrote for the state of California the history of the reform school. He goes, "Oh, I just wrote it from what they gave me." He didn't know what it looked like. He didn't know really where it was. And he was a really nice man and a great writer. But to me, the digging and the research has been the most fun. I've learned so much about people and places and how this school, little fingers reach all out into the community, all up and down the state of California. And to me, this just makes an amazing, amazing story. And it's brought a mission to me to be able to put this in a book form. I'm not a professional writer. I just want to be able to share my passion with the rest of the community. And I've had lots of help. Sue helped me. Stuart helped me. Peppy helped me because she listened to my ramblings about the reform school. And I'm just grateful to be able to share this with people. I mean, we can get into the nitty-gritty of what the governor said. They played music at the grand opening. They had a band. They had glorious speeches. But ultimately, it's going to be the story of the children that's going to bring it back to life. Do I suspect we'll ever have a building built like it? Probably not. But a beautiful monument and sign out there telling about it, explaining to the rest of the world how important we are. To me, it puts us back on the map, once again, with one of California's first. All these people, the first superintendent was the father of public education in California. Not to be confused for Mr. Pelton, the Pelton Wheel Man. And so it's just a fascinating story. The next portion will be, I'm going to go out to the city cemetery go to the actual graves of some of the commissioners. And so what's interesting is they sent in 1868 a group out here to determine whether this would be the next insane asylum after it closed. The state insane asylum is in Stockton. They wanted to put it here. They finally determined that it was too far out in the rural country to do so. But that would have saved the building. But I'll tell you, it's fascinating. I'm excited to get into the weeds to find out the histories of where the children went after they left the school and where they branched out. There was one young man who came back after he was released and wrote a letter to the editor, to the Daily Appeal, to say how much the school helped him. He actually came back to the school and spoke to his former classmates, told them that, you too can make it. You can make yourself better. And he came back and made those comments and to inspire his classmates. And he said, I wasn't a perfect angel. He was a student at a reform school.
Was his name Stuart?
No, I do not believe you. Probably in a different way. But keep in mind, this all happened during the throes of the Civil War.
Yeah.
So there wasn't many resources. The state eventually decided, that it had to close. Several times during its operation, though, the city of San Francisco and the School of Industry actually tried to get it closed. They petitioned their legislature to say, okay, this is a bad place. Let's, close her down. And so it's just a really deep, fascinating story. And it's just fun to share what I've discovered.
Chris, I have a question.
Sure.
In your documentation research, did you find anything on the teachers, the instructors?
There's a few teachers listed, but they're not from here. And so researching them is a challenge. You have to go find a grave. You have to go ancestry. And I've probably got a stack of notes this long. And so it's a deep research.
And you said the kids stayed 50 at a time?
No,
Or was it-
there was originally, the first allotment was 30. It reached up into the 50s. At one point, it might have got to 78 or so, but it was never used for full capacity. It never reached its target goal before it closed. It just the idea of getting them from Sacramento and San Francisco and all over the state of California, and the notes of where they came from, is some of them that long, because they came from all over the state, everywhere from Santa Cruz to Sacramento, everywhere.
It may also be that they didn't send as many because the top floor was not completed.
No, right.
So they didn't build it out, and that could have been for budgetary reasons. And so the first floor had large rooms, so there were probably not as many bedrooms built out. And they may have only been able to have held 50 kids on the first, second floor, because the third floor was unfinished, unless the top floor was what was unfinished. But no one ever put anything in the attic
Right up
in
here.
these buildings.
Where did the supervisor and his family live?
In
They
the
lived
building
they
in
lived in the
beautiful
building.
apartments.
Yep, they had.
Beautifully furnished apartments in the building.
It had full offices, library, church. It was self-contained.
Yeah.
Virtually its
It's a
own,
large.
in a community
building.
in all its own.
Like 188 feet, or something like 88 feet or 188 feet on one side. And it was huge. I've put all of this out of my head because I have other things to do. But now that I'm thinking about it,
Well, one example is the museum, from the corner of the fence to the back of the property is 60 feet.
oh
Yeah.
So that's one
yeah. So
visual.
one
compare
wing
that.
was, if I remember correctly, 188 feet or something to that. Like it's all in these
So 80
amazing
feet
documents.
is to the alley.
I should just leave these out for you to read.
To the alley.
And Chris, did you say that some of the kids, after they either closed down or...
218. Sorry, 218 feet. I see right here.
It's a city block.
Exactly.
It's a monster building. It's huge.
So, did you say that some of the kids, when they left the reform school, remained in the area?
Yeah, they did. Some of them did remain in
So it
the
would be interesting to track down if they left any diaries or any
Right.
information as to their account of what their experience.
Yeah, it's
More
been.
research.
Yes, more research. Yeah, the first ambassador to Japan,
Charles DeLong
Charles DeLong, wrote about it in his diary.
took his wife
Yep,
for a
took,
buggy ride.
yep,
There,
buggy
sure
ride
enough.
to see the school.
He's very good cemetery. What did the kids wear?
They wore basic canvas pants,
White tops.
white tops, canvas pants.
Kind of a uniform.
Unlike Preston Castle, which a lot of people claim is the first reform school in California, they didn't make their own shoes. There were records of having bought them. In Preston, they made their shoes on site so that there was a little mark when they ran off they could bring back. But
Yeah.
in this case, if you read my friend Jamie Rubio's book, she'll tell you all about the shoes that they made. And so I have not found a famous person per se that was a student here like some of the other places. But it's just amazing, the clothing, the materials they bought, the food they used. You look at the food and you look at it now under our standards and go, that doesn't sound very tasty. But you know what? It was meant to nourish them. It wasn't meant to be a gourmet meal.
What, mush?
Mush. They had mush every morning. Mm-hmm.
They had to grow their own fruits and
Yep.
vegetables.
Yep. They had the big gardens. They had courtyards. They played. I'm sure they had recreation time. You know, we're still talking children. And so,
In the library, have you come across any books that are stamped Marysville Reform School that have
I've-
made it back?
I have not seen any come back.
Has anybody?
I'd like to go down to Stanford because that's where a lot of it disappeared to. They took it off to Stanford because it was quite an extensive collection of books. And as a book person, it'd be just amazing to find one book.
Stanford has a curator.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I have to reach out and
Especially all the homes above Stanford University. So all of those beautiful homes Professor wrote. There has to be.
There's got to be
story.
one.
And
There's
they
got to be
know
something
about
left
it.
out
Yeah,
there.
They're very passionate.
Yeah. I've seen some of the tools from the school that were in a local. What's that? Yeah, farming tools that were used, and you can see they made nails and all kinds of farm implements and things like
Where
that.
did you find the tools?
A farmer in District 10 has them. The Sodaro farms have them, and
They
so
unearthed them. Tell the story. Do you know? They unearthed them.
yeah, they unearthed them in that, and they have them in a shed.
They own the land
Yeah.
where the building
Yeah.
was now.
Yeah, and
Well,
so
they were processing the land for orchards, and so when that happens, they come in with this large equipment that cuts the dirt and things like that.
and what's interesting, because I've been out there, Sodaro Ranch, when it's rained, and the bricks, you'll find them come up out of the ground.
Wow.
And so we knew it was really close to that.
Are there any children buried in the cemetery? Any records of them?
I've not found a death yet.
Haven't found any yet.
Yeah, I've never. Yes, Andre.
I don't get in a room with people with this much knowledge very often. So, one of the pet little hunches I have is you had this horrific flood in '62. I don't know how this played into the plans here, and then it closes in
1868.
okay, and the building's lost in the early
Yeah.
'70s. Right about that time is, help me out, Warren Miller leaves for New York. And
Yeah.
you almost get the feeling that it was kind of an end of some kind of era there, and Marysville moved into a new period.
Yeah, I
And-
don't disagree.
And to take this gem of a building down,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it boggles
Yeah, I
you.
know,
It
right?
just,
Yeah.
but it just sat there for years. It was just
Yeah, you
burglarized.
I don't know what
bits
it
and pieces
could have-
taken.
the fact that it was so labor intensive, it just,
Yeah.
I don't know what you do.
So sad.
This was
Hire
to be,
some security or
This
something.
was to have been a state capital.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
state capital as well. So when that decision wasn't made, people probably decided, we're going to go elsewhere. There's not going to be the opportunity we thought we would have. And off they went. And how many state capitals were there supposed to be? There were 11.
Yeah,
It was
11 or
Vallejo,
12.
it was Monterey, it was everything.
And the interesting part is you're right. This was an architectural masterpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, with this building still standing,
Mm.
we'd have one of the best tourist attractions
Yeah.
anywhere in the state.
Well, it depends on who owned it. Because
This is correct,
if it
Stuart.
had been
I'll
inherited
give you
by
that, Perry.
One of our legacy property owners now.
University or something.
Yeah, it could have been a lot of things. I mean, there's the famous hotel there in Colorado, and so it would have rivaled that. It's just amazing. It is just amazing.
I have to say, it's amazing to me to hear the passion that comes out of you sharing your story, and to know just out of the books that Stuart has rendered this drawing. Then we get to share it and see it, and hopefully a book is made with all of it.
It's going to be a work. I'll be honest. It's going to be a work because I'm not a professional writer, but it's going to be something that'll be full of passion. And
Well, the dimensions, look, they were
Yeah.
very precise
yes,
about the dimensions. And I had to comb over all of the documents again and highlight them in yellow and then write it all down and get my scale and draw it out and then say, really? And how did these axes fit? And it was fascinating. And then the descriptions about the fence and what went on behind, where the fence was in proximity to each room.
Just to me, the documentation
Yeah.
that they kept.
Yeah.
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 That
Oh,
was
and there
just-
are two descriptions. There was the description about what it was supposed to be, and then there was the description of what it became.
Oh.
And I, of course, used the what it became because that's the most accurate or the most up to date. Which is why it's so important to keep notes. Okay?
Yes.
So it's so important to keep accurate
Yeah.
records.
So did the fence keep the kids in, or
Yes.
it was?
6
Well,
feet's not enough.
No,
Sorry.
and there was
They kept escaping.
and there was gates. There was gates. I mean, if they wanted to escape, it was probably one of the easier ones to escape from. I mean, we're not talking Alcatraz here.
Somebody could just boost their friend.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
just
I
walk
could
through the
get
gate.
over
Yeah,
the wall.
yeah.
Yeah.
But could you imagine the journey from the school back into town? Yes, a long walk with no car.
Well, the
Dunbar
road
and
is,
Oaks.
the boat.
Sorry.
the road is still the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Highway 70 hasn't been altered.
No,
and it will be soon, but it's basically the way it was. To be
And it was a straight shot off the road, right straight to the Reform School.
Well, you can also see, you can point to where the ranch was,
Yeah.
but look at how the river was, okay?
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah, it's
this
got a lot of
continuation
wiggles.
Up there, you know.
Well, it described the height. It was 30 feet above the river
Riverbank.
level.
Yep, it was.
It was the description, the trees, the placement of the trees. These descriptions were very thorough. Someone needed to paint a glorious picture to somebody
Yeah.
to make sure this thing happened.
And there were no levees then.
No
so the
levees.
No.
No levees at all.
So it flowed overland, and we don't have
Yeah.
these deluges of water,
Yeah.
and it wasn't no levied around like in
Like the
Marysville, it
fog,
just
the
flowed.
fog we have tonight, you'd have had out there,
Sure,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
there were tulies.
right around the river.
Yeah.
What's interesting, and we all know they probably swam in the river and enjoyed the
Oh,
recreational.
sure, yeah. And
And
the mosquitoes in the summer.
oh no, that was one of the claims was the mosquitoes, but they didn't ever substantiate that they had outbreaks of anything. And so they had some fevers and things like that, but
That's true.
but they didn't have any mass outbreaks of anything. Never recorded any anyway. It was breezy in the winter, I'm sure, and you get the river cool at night. So just an amazing
Well, they
place.
did not describe chimneys.
No, they did not
They
describe chimney.
any chimneys or any HVAC, which is
Mm.
heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So it would have just been H.
But
Awful lot of windows up
Yeah.
here.
window ventilation.
So wait a minute,
No.
did,
Oh, yeah.
did it talk about how it was heated though? Was it
Wooden stoves? or
Yeah,
anything?
it would have
It had to have been wooden stoves. There's virtually
There's
no
no
record.
chimneys.
Right, I mean, like where would the stoves be in all the rooms or just
Oh, there's
one?
probably one in each room.
Yeah, there probably was. Yeah, I'd agree with Stuart. There would be one in each room, but it never describes that at all.
I have
It was a
holes
given.
in my wall in each of my former rooms upstairs. I have a building built in 1859, and there were holes where all the pot-belly stoves went up.
Like that one.
In
Exactly.
every in between each window, because it was a hotel, and so each room had a pot-belly stove.
And this house does. There's
Yeah.
Yeah,
upstairs, they're directly upstairs the same, two upstairs also.
So so it would have had a. And then,
Yeah, and the water tank was built up into the roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what was interesting is the water tank. They had to.
Why were I could never understand why water tanks were up high.
Water pressure.
Yeah, so you could get it to come back.
Comes down.
So it'll flow down.
Pump it up.
And to fill up the pool, the pool that was under in the basement was 1,000 gallons.
That would scared me.
Yeah, I mean that's a good size. It's a good size pool under the ground. So when the building went away, and over the years as it got filled in, boy, you ever come across that pool, you'd have a
Hole in the ground.
a big hole in the ground. Just a fast. And there's so many parts. You can go and we can pick and jump to all parts of the school. And so it's just become my passion to further explore
I'm
school.
sure if you dug even deeper up in that property, you'd find a lot
Oh, I
more.
bet.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So
Absolutely.
have you been on the property itself? And
I've been out there. I have not actually walked on it yet.
It's gonna be interesting to really find.
I mean, are
Yeah.
the owners working with you on it?
I've had real positive response. Very positive response. So.
Yeah, they're excited about it. Or
Well,
PG&E with their-
I'll be honest with you. I'll give Vicky from the cemetery credit because using
was erected.
yeah they used the use of the metal probe helps find places like that without disturbing the ground, and so it's not like I'm going to take the pickaxe, the backhoe, and the shovel out there to dig it up. I want to. It's still, to me, it's a sacred place. It's a place of history and should be maintained that way. So, in and out with this little
Wait,
description
let me read
and
this.
digging around.
The third story will be mainly devoted to sleeping apartments for the inmates of the school.
Yeah, yeah.
The third floor?
This was the description of what it was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it end up being?
I mean, they're very thorough.
Yeah, they mean down to the number of beans they used and the amount
Oh,
of
wait.
flour they used.
The basement story is divided into a number of apartments designed for the present for dining rooms, kitchen, washrooms, storerooms, workshops, etc. Second or main floor, extremities of the great wings, 2 large rooms, 34 by 44 feet, which are intended for a schoolroom and a chapel. The balance of this story is divided into a number of large and elegant apartments, some for the use of the superintendent and teachers, parlors, reception, and bedrooms, library, classrooms, etc.
Yeah.
I mean,
The reports are just stunning to read.
Yeah.
And the book on them is that thick because I publish one every year, sometimes twice a year,
Oh.
and gave it to the state legislature. I had to report to the governor.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just, it's been a passion.
It described the bush hammered
Yeah.
stone on the first floor or the basement, which was the base of the building. That's why it's called basement, the base of the building. And then brick on the first or second, which is the first.
And
third floor. And the
this-
staircase went up to the first
and it was
floor.
granite.
Granite stairs.
Yeah,
yeah,
swept
granite.
staircase. Yeah,
Yeah.
must have been gorgeous.
But wasn't the bricks formed from his property?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't that what you
yeah,
read?
yeah.
Well, it wouldn't have survived because they didn't have kilns hot enough here,
Right.
and they would have crumbled just like my building is doing. It was just built in 1859.
But we've pulled, and we have pulled bricks out of transit, so there's got to be some there.
Yeah,
It's
there's,
just sandy.
Yeah. There's some left out there.
there's been flooding too.
We-
It'd be great to
flooded.
find one, take it, and see if they were used to build anything in town.
I have not read where they were, but Mr. Strain sold them. Could have sold them very easily. And he built his own home on the lot. So the house might have been built
Oh yeah.
from the brick. And they built them on site. The bricks were built on site. So it's very fascinating. Very, very fascinating.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been an adventure to get to this point. Now we got to get to the next one. Well, thank you. Unless anybody else got any questions.
How again, people know people that know people in this room. How challenging would it be to procure somebody with some passion and expertise to produce a nice 3D model of this?
Yeah.
Are we talking?
Well, that's,
You know,
I would
forget
think it would be
about it,
something
or-
that could be doable.
Yeah, no, I could do. I mean, I could do it.
I know you've got
Right.
many plates full and everything, but aren't there
Do you want a future city?
No,
Or do you want me to build the old city we are now?
retired
I'd love to teach
engineers
students
and
to help.
architects? I mean, the
Yeah.
whole Caltrans.
Yeah.
There are people
yeah.
out there that this is kind of their thing.
It would be great to get high school
Actually-
students that are interested in.
Actually, set designers do that all the time.
That's true.
Or set designers. Are you? That's you?
Well, she has a family member that's a well.
But it could easily be redone. It could be designed in a 3D model.
Maybe I can
Oh my
just-
Is it a Tony Award winning?
Yes,
Tony
it
Award
is.
winning set designer? Yeah.
But they do 3D all the time.
Ooh,
You
I
could
have
take,
it.
yeah, you
That'd
could
be
do 3D print it at the library. Have them print it. I think Wide Awake Geek could probably do it, couldn't they? On their 3D printer?
Yes, they could create
Yeah.
a 3D. Yes.
A lot cheaper.
Yes, a lot cheaper.
A lot cheaper.
You
Yeah.
would love it, actually.
That would be a really fun thing to see.
Granite, yeah.
That's a good idea.
Well, what kind of money? We could do a GoFundMe. I don't know exactly the parameters here, but what kind of money are we talking to have a Wide Awake Geek? Are we talking tens of thousands? Or?
No.
Oh, no,
Well, we would have to talk to Craig.
Yeah, I'd have to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'm not
And you can take my notes.
Well, you can come with us.
Oh, okay.
Talk about notes.
Marysville Charter Academy.
That'd be
Oh,
brilliant,
yeah.
wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be a great project for a student.
Yeah.
Those kids are
That would be
geniuses.
cool.
Yeah, they are.
Even somebody at Yuba College that wants to go on to be an architect.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it would be Marysville. Yeah.
Chris will take care of that.
By then.
Well,
That's why I left
Many
town.
plates.
Courses.
Man,
We'd be amazed out there. We got inside the info center a little replica of the Buckeye Temple.
Yes.
right.
That the little girl did when they were supposed to be doing the California missions. But she won't chose to do the Buckeye Temple.
Oh, that's so.
They're out
funny.
there, the kids are out there that may want to do it.
I made my mission out of sugar cubes.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Well, I just appreciate everyone coming out and the viewers that are out there. It's been a fun time. It really has. It's been a good lecture, and I've had fun telling the story, because that's what I like to do. I like to tell the story of these great places. So thank you all for coming. Great refreshments in the back.
Yes.
Lots of things to eat and drink.
If you want to look at those,
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Put 'em
well
out.
in the maps, because the maps are very thorough with every street name in East Marysville on the property.
Makes it fun.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have any infomercials? I do. Next month we're going to be doing Stan Gelling. And if you're not local, he was a political satirical cartoonist, worked at the Appeal Grant for 30-something years. And we have a person that's going to loan us his collections of storyboards. And I know some of you even have some of his original artwork. So look for that and check it out.
Is that somebody that lives locally, or why?
Well, he's been dead quite a while, but he worked at the newspaper as a salesman, and then he did the editorial page called The Local Scene of the characters and cartoons. And so his original storyboards, a person owns the originals in a collection, and we're going to be borrowing that and putting it on display and telling his life story.
Interesting. Was he ever syndicated?
No, just the tale. He was in the Navy, and I don't think that was syndicated either. He did that for the Navy at the end of World War II, before he came here.
They're great.
They're wonderful.
They're great drawings. Yeah, we have some.
So you can be like,
Give yourself a spell and Auntie May with Russell.
The History of the Marysville Reform School, another Talks and Tours presentation from the Mary Aaron Museum. Learn more and support Talks and Tours at maryaaronmuseum.com. Lots to see on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE this weekend. 5:30 p.m. Friday, the Marysville Christmas tree lighting, live from downtown Marysville.
And Merry Christmas to all.
6:30 p.m. Friday, the Marysville State Reform School. Why and where was it located here? Live from the Mary Aaron Museum. 5 p.m. Saturday, the Marysville Christmas Parade, live from historic downtown Marysville. 4 p.m. Sunday, the 83rd Messiah performance by the Yuba-Sutter Oratorio Society Chorus and Yuba-Sutter Symphony, presented by Plumas Lake Self Storage. Lots to see on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE this weekend, all on Yuba-Sutter.LIVE, on Facebook at LiveStreaming YS.